live in weird times. Where I grew up in Illinois, from the top of the trees in our pasture, if you looked off into the distance, you could see Interstate 80 way, way out in the distance. And I like to say in my travels around the country, and I've lived a lot of different places, I have always tried to live most of my life somewhere near Interstate 80. It just feels like home. It's great to be here in Cleveland, but I want to say I've driven Interstate 80 from Colorado to Council Bluffs and from Nebraska to New Haven a great many times, but I've never driven it like I did this week because, relatively speaking, there's nobody out there. I'd like to say it's like an Alfred Hitchcock movie feeling, but that dates me a little bit. So then I thought, well, maybe it's a Stephen King kind of movie, and that dates me too. So let's just say, driving out there, it's like a Coen Brothers movie. It's just weird. For those of us who love people, this time is exceedingly difficult. I'm an exuberant handshaker. I love a good, solid handshake and someone who looks you in the eyes and says, "Good to see you." Now, not only can I not shake hands, I can't even hug my relatives. It's weird. We live in weird times. I have to admit, I'm tired of this social distancing. For social beings like me, it's exhausting. I want to be around people. In church and on the street and everywhere. I want to stroll down the aisle at Target and take my time reading labels and comparing ingredients so that I have an excuse to talk with the other type A personalities doing the same thing with me there. I used to live in downtown St. Paul, Minnesota, and now I live in downtown Cleveland because I love the lights and the action and the people. And now it's so quiet. I'm tired of social distancing. Yes, I know there are some people who relish their alone time. I have a high school friend who has always been reticent and reclusive, a real loner. I've threatened to get him a t-shirt that says, "Been practicing social distancing since 1972. But for many of us, this social distancing is increasingly hard because it's so weird. All these things that we're used to are different. You can tell by now I like the word weird. It comes from the German word "werde," which means becoming, evolving, changing. When something's weird, it may be because God is bringing something new. In the midst of the strangeness and the stress, there may be something new that's coming, and that's good, not just in the things that are light and fun to talk about, but for a lot of people for whom this time is nothing short of a disaster in so many ways, financial or personal or health-wise. We need ways to think about this situation. One of my favorite scholars is an anthropologist named Victor Turner. He said there's times in human life that are liminal. Liminality is like you're standing in a doorway. You're right on the threshold. It's not clear, are you in or are you out? Are you going one way or the other? You're betwixt and between. It's liminal. In that complex threshold that we're in, there's multiple doors. Are we going to go forward or back or to one side or the other? How do we know which way to go? I like Victor Turner because he said the way that you're going to go is probably going to be significantly based upon the symbols that guide your life. Symbols, those clusters of core values that come together and they say who you are and what you're about, and they motivate you, they move you, they guide you. Whatever symbols form the lens on reality that is yours determines which direction you'll head out of the doorway. Are you going to head backwards? Can you recapture life as it used to be. I like to kid my colleagues in the Presbyterian Church and say, you know, if the 1950s ever come again, the Presbyterian Church is ready. But we all know you just cannot recapture the past. You try to do that and you're going to live in denial. So we have this tendency to say, well, maybe we can just go to the left or go to the right. Maybe we can avoid something that's going to be all that much of a change by just avoiding in that way. And it's another form of denial. The way forward for us is the way forward into a new reality. But to step forward, we have to trust. And that's where that idea of in the beginning God comes from. The direction we choose needs to be based on God. And God has given us minds to use in all times and places, and especially now. So we need to use our minds as we step forward and to make our next steps based on facts. Thank God for the number crunchers and for the people who use fact-based science to help us determine things. And then there's values that guide us also along with the facts, the values that help us to realize why we're doing what we're doing. First of all, we're doing all this social distancing because this is a virus that attacks people over 65. And I have learned not to say that it attacks the elderly because, well, now I'm 65. Well, we want to keep those people that have accumulated years, let's just say that, with long life stories. We want to keep them around because we haven't heard the stories enough. We love those stories and we want to hear more, and these people are our heroes and we need their wisdom, the inspiration that they bring, and we want to spend precious time with them. And so it matters, and we do this for them. Secondly, we do this social distancing because you never know among younger people who is going to have a particularly severe attack of this virus. And we have friends, younger friends, whom we valued deeply. And we have friends of friends and people we've never even met, but they're doctors and nurses and grocery store clerks and bus drivers and all these other people who deserve a long life. We are immensely grateful for them and for the risks they're taking at this time, and we want to show solidarity with them. So we're doing this social distancing for them. And thirdly, we started doing this social isolating because this virus attacks the lungs. And if you can imagine someone gasping for every breath because their lungs are swelling shut, it is something you never want to see, much less have someone experience. And now we're learning that the virus attacks every major organ in the body, and we are all at risk. So yes, we are making this sacrifice of staying apart from one another because we care about everyone. What do we think about sacrifice as Christians? Well, it's core to who we are. It's why the cross is at the center of our worship space, because Jesus lived a life of sacrifice. And the cross epitomizes that life, the cluster of values that speak of his arrest and trial and beating and torture and death, that he gave up his life so that others might live. The symbol of the cross is about sacrificial love and how God validated that kind of life with resurrection. The cross is our symbol that guides us in this liminal time through the doorway and into the future. If Jesus could sacrifice like that, then we as Christians find it possible to give up some of our comforts and joys, as well as to make real substantive sacrifices so that other people can live. We need to say thank you to those public leaders who have had the wisdom and the courage to ask us and even require us to be apart for a while. I want to affirm, and we want to affirm, those who have asked us to make those sacrifices and help us to think more deeply, because we have the time to think more deeply. But as a church, we need a spirituality, a theology that gives us a sense of vision and a sense of hope. And that's why I love the first chapters in the book of Genesis. The most memorable sermon I have ever heard was one where the minister stood up, read the first 4 words of the book of Genesis, "In the beginning, God," and then he sat down. End of sermon. Most memorable sermon I've ever heard. I remember it word for word. In the beginning, God. Because you know what? If we keep that in mind, then everything else comes into perspective. And it gives us a sense of calm, trust, purpose. Genesis chapter 1 says, "In the beginning there was," in the Hebrew it says, "tohu vabohu." Bible scholar Robert Alter translates that welter and waste. New Testament scholar Niels Dahl translates it cosmic custard. In the Bible it simply says chaos in many places. In the beginning there was some sort of chaos, and God spoke, and out of the chaos came order. Genesis gives us a realistic spiritual vision because there are times of chaos, true chaos, and we are in this chaotic liminal time that leads us to worry and be concerned, to be afraid, and even to panic. And that's where it is crucial to remember, in the beginning, God. We are not alone. Now, God did not do this to us, but God will be with us and help guide us through this chaos. The rest of the creation story in Genesis chapter 1 is that God created the heavens and the earth, this new beginning, but it is important to remember how God did it. Look at the story again. It says, day by day, light and dark, step 1, day and night, step 2, waters and land, step 3, grass and trees, another step, stars and sun and moon, other steps, creatures in the waters, another step, creatures on the land, another, domestic creatures. And what's it saying? It's saying that it doesn't happen all at once. And if we want to move forward into a positive future that God is guiding us into, then we need to be willing to take the time and to take it step by step. The biblical story gives us the patience to do this. Let me say that another way. It is not just that God is in the sunset or God is in the animals. It is, according to this story, God is in the process. The time of process that we are in is one of experimentation and testing and transition. And I am grateful for the scientists who are experimenting, trying to come up with new drugs and new procedures. And we need to have the patience to give them the time to tell us what is real and true and what's going to work. But it's not just a time for the scientists. It's a time for our country. And it's a time for the world. And it's a time for the church to rethink who we are. We need to be very clear that this is the greatest crisis of our generation. And this transition time is going to be one that is going to take a long time and one that will require steps in a process. And we as people of faith need to ask, what is God enabling and empowering us to be and to become now and as we step into the future? It's up to us to see that we are more connected than we have ever seen before as a world, as a human race. Now, how do we need to think about ourselves differently? How do we need to see ourselves differently? How do we need to see one another differently? How do we need to treat one another differently? And how do we need to structure society differently? No one has any idea of exactly what this is going to look like as we move forward, but I do believe that God will give us opportunities, will give us windows of opportunity, moments of grace, and it will be up to us to have the courage and the faith to reach out and embrace those possibilities, those moments, because they won't last forever. You remember that old hymn, "Once to every man and nation comes a moment to decide. In the strife of truth with falsehood, for the good or evil side. Some great cause, some great decision, offering each the bloom or blight. And the choice goes by forever, twixt that darkness and that light. New occasions teach new duties. Time makes ancient good uncouth. They must upward still and onward who would keep abreast of truth." Now, we are facing that future. And our moments to decide will be before us. And what we need to remember as we step forward into this new day is that we have the power of love that has been given to us in Jesus Christ. We have been given the power to sacrifice, to find ways to be sensitive to those people in the world out there and to reach out to them. We need to do it as a church. We need to do it as a country. We need to do it as a human race. Now's our moment. One last thing about the Genesis story. It says that God created the human beings, all of them, in God's image. And if that's the truth, then we need to respect all of these different people and to listen to one another, to talk with them with respect, to listen with respect, to learn together with respect, and to have ways of communicating that help us keep in contact with each other. God has given us the gifts, but we have to have the patience in the process to listen for something new that God is giving to us in this creation. It's a daunting situation that we are facing, but by faith we trust that God will work with us to bring a new day. And remember always that at the end of that Genesis story, at the very end of that story, it says there comes rest, peace, Sabbath. God rested because it was all exceedingly good. As people of faith, we are not naive. We know what we're facing is difficult. It will be a long struggle and a challenging one on so many different levels. But this God who generated in the Genesis story is with us and will be generating in the chaos that we are in this betwixt and between time. And God is generating something out of the chaos for us, a new beginning. In the midst of this global pandemic, I look forward to the honor of listening to and learning from the people of Old Stone Church. And I look forward to discerning with you what God is giving to this historic, vibrant, strong, faithful congregation. Because I believe that God is preparing something similar here too, namely, a new beginning. Amen.
Thanks for watching our video. Make sure to subscribe to get the latest and greatest videos from the Old Stone Church. And if you feel blessed by our message, please go to theoldstonechurch.org and click Donate. God bless you today and forever. The Old Stone Church. We've been loving Christ and serving City since 1820.